Sicker and sicker, and not knowing what to do or how to get help because you don't have another dime or a car, money, or health insurance. The poverty of working your fingers to the bone every day, taking care of somebody else's children and neglecting your own, and still not being able to pay your bills. The poverty of having a job which does not let you afford a stable place to live, and being terrified you'll become homeless and lose your children to foster care. The poverty of losing your job, running out of unemployment benefits, and having no other help in sight. The poverty of working all your life caring for your own children and having to start all over again caring for the grandchildren you love. The poverty of earning a college degree, having children, opening a daycare center, and taking home $300 a week or a month if you're lucky. The poverty of loneliness and isolation and alienation, having no one to call or visit, tell you where to get help, assist you in getting it, or care if you're living or dead. The poverty of having too much and sharing too little and having the burden of nothing to carry. The poverty of convenient blindness and deafness and indifference to others. The poverty of low aim and paltry purpose, of weak will and tiny vision, of big meetings and small actions, of loud talk and sullen, grudging service. The poverty of believing in nothing, standing for nothing, sharing nothing, sacrificing nothing, struggling with others for nothing. The poverty of pride and ingratitude for God's gifts of life and children and family and freedom and home and country, and not wanting for others what you want for yourself. The poverty of greed for more and more and more, ignoring, blaming, and exploiting the needy and taking from the weak to please the strong. The poverty of addiction to more and more things, drugs, drink, work, self, violence, power, fleeting fame, and an unjust status quo. The poverty of fear which keeps you from doing the thing you think is right. The poverty of convenient ignorance about the needs of those around you and despair and cynicism. God help us end poverty in our time, in all its faces and places, young and old, rural, urban, suburban, and small town too, and in every color of humans you have made everywhere. God help us to end poverty in our time in all its guises, inside and out, physical and spiritual, so that all our and your children may live the lives that you intend. Amen. We pause now together to lift up that which sits light and heavy on our hearts. Kathy Bosson has returned home after a successful surgery. Patty Ryan returned to the hospital for additional procedures and is now recovering. We hold them both in our hearts as their health improves. P.D. Wadler's father, Larry, has moved to a senior independent living facility and is slowly improving. Albert Puccio reports his mother, Haiti, is adapting well to the skilled nursing facility. We wish them all well and send them healing thoughts. We mourn the passing of two influential men, although they were not part of our congregation. The Reverend Dr. Dorsey Blake inspired a generation of UU ministers while at Starr King School for the Ministry. He was handpicked by Howard Thurman to succeed him as the presiding minister at the Church for the Fellowship of All Peoples. Roy Ayers, known as the godfather of neo-soul and who helped pioneer jazz funk, was a vibraphonist, record producer, and composer. In the book, which we put in the foyer so that you may put things that have been joys or concerns in your life this week, I read, "May we give thanks for the many African Americans who have served in Congress from Houston: Barbara, Mickey, Craig, Sheila, Sylvester, and Al." We now turn to a practice inspired by African, indigenous, and pagan traditions. We say aloud or bring to mind those who we wish to be held by the loving embrace of this religious community. They are part of the great cloud of witness and memory, and we will, even if we do not know their names, hold them in our hearts. In this great cloud of witness and memory, amid this beloved community, we hear these names and hold them in our hearts. Let us remember the suffering and joy amid and among our community that we do not know. We now enter into a time of stillness. The Buddha said, "Bring your mind to noble silence. Unify your mind in noble silence. Concentrate your mind in noble silence. Enter into rapture and pleasure born of silence, derived of concentration and awareness that is free from thought and fabrication. In the spirit of love, hope, and compassion, we enter into a time of silent prayer, meditation, and transformation."
In the quiet of this place, let this moment fill with grace. This is my prayer. This is my prayer. May the sense of mystery guide us through our journey. This is my prayer. This is my prayer. This is my prayer.
Our morning offering each week is shared with an organization that shares our Unitarian Universalist values and through which we may live out our principles in the world. It is our tradition that on a Sunday near March 8th, International Women's Day, our offering is shared with the International Convocation of Unitarian Universalist Women. Also known as International Women's Convocation, or IWC, this is a nonprofit organization that advances equity for women and girls worldwide through leadership development, empowerment, and awareness programs, advocacy, and resources. This morning, to tell us more about IWC is Zofia, the former executive director of the International Convocation of Unitarian Universalist Women.
Oh, sorry about that. Oh, I don't think I need the chair. Good. Am I heard? Yes. Okay. Good morning. So my name is Zofia Stranicki. Some of you may know me. I've been coming off and on to this church for a while, and this is not the first time I'm here to present the organization International Convocation of UU Women, or ICUUW. We actually dropped the International Women's Convocation because we wanted to emphasize that our UU values. So we are no longer IWC, but ICUUW, International Convocation of UU Women. So this year, the world celebrates 30 years of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. This is a visionary 1995 roadmap agreed by 189 governments to achieve the equal rights of women and girls. UN Women's latest report reviewing the past 30 years shows that despite progress in certain areas, there have been numerous setbacks. The number of women and girls living in conflict and experiencing conflict-related sexual violence has increased by 50%. A woman or girl is killed every 10 minutes by a partner or a family member. 3/4 of lawmakers around the world are still men. About the same percentage of the world's population is living under autocratic rule, and as we know, the weakening of democratic institutions has gone hand in hand with backlash to gender equality. As UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, actually just a day or so ago, instead of mainstreaming equal rights, we're seeing the mainstreaming of misogyny. As bad as it looks, as hard as this moment is, we are in it because we're winning, believes Tarana Burke, founder of the Me Too movement. All of us at ICW are in it because we're winning. We are in it because we're part of a community of UUs who believe in our mission to make the world equal and better for everyone. The establishment of the International Convocation of UU Women was sparked by the first international gathering of UU women and progressive people of faith here in Houston in 2009, and some of you may have participated in that event and have fond memories. The organization has come a long way since then, offering a variety of programs, projects, and resources, moving the needle toward gender equality for UU communities and beyond. We are currently the only international UU organization working directly with UU communities around the world. As an organization in consultative status with the UN Economic and Social Council and members of the US Women's Caucus, which is an alliance of US feminists, our advocacy efforts have become increasingly important. This coming week, we are inaugurating a spring seminar in conjunction with the annual UN Commission on the Status of Women meetings in New York City. UUs from around the world will connect, learn about the UN from seasoned experts, and engage in conversation circles. Many women, especially here in Texas, may feel that their rights and bodily autonomy are slipping through their fingers. You or one of your loved ones may be one of them. But now is not the time to panic. Now is not the time to capitulate. Now is the time to make noise, to be part of a movement, and to organize together in grassroots advocacy. Now is the time to join our movement. So if you are not already on our email list, I urge you to go on our website. It's INTL from International, INTL womensconvo.org, and sign up for our newsletters and join, if you can, as a member. If you want to meet fellow activists, build connections, and hear about the good work happening in our networks, please attend our twice-a-month Zoom gatherings. As bad as it looks, as hard as this moment is, we must keep pushing for change. Women and girls cannot wait another 30 years for equal rights. So please give generously so we can persist and resist. Thank you.
Those in our sanctuary will find the instructions for text giving in the order of service next to the name of the shared offering recipient. And those watching the live stream will see the instructions on your screen. Our regular Sunday morning offering collection invites us to weave a tapestry of love and action. We ask you to give generously. A morning offering will now be gratefully received.
me in the words to dedicate our offering found in your order of service. To the work of this church, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings.
Our first reading from Special Message to the Congress proposing a nationwide war on the sources of poverty, March 16, 1964, by Landon B. Johnson. We are citizens of the richest and most fortunate nation in the history of the world. 180 years ago, we were a small country struggling for survival on the margin of a hostile land. Today, we have established a civilization of free men which spans an entire continent. With the growth of our country has come opportunity for our people, opportunity to educate our children, to see our energies in productive work, to increase our leisure opportunity for almost every American to hope that through work and talent, he could create a better life for himself and his family. The path toward this has not been an easy one, but we have never lost sight of our goal, an America in which every citizen shares all the opportunities of his society, in which every man has a chance to advance his welfare to the limit of his capacities. We have come a long way toward our goal. We still have a long way to go. The distance which remains is the measure of the great unfinished work of our society. To finish that work, I have called for a national war on poverty. Our objective, total victory. Here ends the first reading.
The second reading is titled Duras Poverty by Cynthia Cruz, and it begins with a quote from Marguerite Duras' book, The Lover. The link with poverty is there in the man's hat, too, for money has got to be brought in somehow, end quote. Poverty is in the language. It is in her gaze back. It seeps and oozes into every poverty-stricken word. Each word is used sparingly, as if each word were currency. It is everywhere. It stains everything. It is everywhere. It flies about. It watches from every corner of the page. Poverty is not something one leaves behind. A child born into poverty will always feel its presence at the edges of everything. Even right now, you can feel it. It is in my words, these tiny fractured things. There ends the second reading.
I invite you now to open your hymnals to number 125, From the Crush of Wealth and Power. Please rise in body or spirit and join your voices in song.
More than 60 years ago, a president from Texas stood before Congress with an important message. Lyndon B. Johnson told the citizens of the richest nation in the history of the world that he was calling for a national war on poverty. During the rest of his administration, the House and the Senate responded by working to create Medicare, Medicaid, Head Start, and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. In the decades since, tens of millions of people have benefited from those imperfect programs. Following the passage of the Affordable Health Care Act in 2010, Medicaid has come to cover 72 million. Without it, they would not easily have access to health care. They would struggle more, their health would be worse, and they would be less able to contribute to society. SNAP, meanwhile, currently provides benefits for 42 million people. It enables them to better feed their families and afford higher quality food. I should know, during a particularly difficult period of my life, SNAP helped ensure that my family and I were food secure. Now, I was lucky. I've never known true poverty. I grew up in a middle-income family, and when I have struggled financially, I've always had the safety net of my parents to fall back on. But I do agree with the poet Cynthia Cruz when she writes, "Poverty is not something we leave behind." Even the glimpses of it I've seen in my own life have made me profoundly grateful for programs like SNAP and shaped my perspective. When I needed them, they made my life easier and allowed me to focus less on the daily struggle to put food on the table and more on things like pursuing my education. In the long run, they have empowered me to contribute more to society than I might have been able to do otherwise. That, of course, is the point. A society that provides a modicum of care for all of its members empowers everyone to reach closer to their full human potential. It is, as President Johnson said in the imperfect language of his day, we should live in a country in which every citizen shares all the opportunities of society, in which every person has a chance to advance their welfare to the limit of their capacities. A chance to advance their welfare. Have you ever benefited from such programs? Do you know somebody whose life is better because of Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, or Head Start? I suspect that you have, or that you do. 72 million people is a lot of people. 42 million people are a lot of people. Even in our increasingly economically segregated society, I anticipate that even if you don't directly benefit from such programs, you know people that do. These programs come from what we might call the politics of compassion. Compassion that is that experience of suffering together. Intellectually, it has been well described by our Unitarian forebearer, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, when she wrote, and later named by Martin Luther King Jr. Harper observed that more than a century and a half ago, we are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity. And society cannot trample on the weakest of its members without receiving a curse on its own soul. 100 years later, King reminded us we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. Compassion is closely connected to empathy. It's the ability to imagine ourselves in the place of another. I am empathetic when I can picture myself living your life. The Unitarian Universalist theologian Forrest Church once named the experience as the ability to love your enemy as yourself, to see your tears in another's eyes. He thought that it formed the core of our Universalist theology, the recognition that we are each a living member of the great family of all souls, as the Unitarian theologian William Ellery Channing put it. Religious teachers across numerous traditions have long recognized that opening ourselves to compassion and empathy is a central spiritual practice. God is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, claims one psalmist in the Hebrew Bible. A light shines in the darkness for those who are gracious, compassionate, and beneficent, advises another. Blessed are those who considereth the poor, began a 19th century prayer from our own tradition. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion, enjoins our famous contemporary, the Dalai Lama. It would be easy to go on. Instead, I will invoke the Unitarian Universalist theologian Rebecca Parker to move us along. She wrote, "To have a soul is to live with sensitive awareness of the real presence of other human beings and the earth. It's to recall that compassion and empathy lie at the core of genuine religion. Religion, I've said in the past, is what binds us together. Compassion and empathy are ways we connect to each other. Placing them at the center is, as Parker states, an invitation to make your whole being an act of praise, an invitation to grow your soul. To grow your soul, to make your whole being an act of praise. Children are often particularly empathetic. They can sometimes see common humanity across all human divisors. Yet almost every autobiography written by someone a generation or more ago in the segregated South who was a person of color contains a similar story of witnessing white children being taught to hate people of color. The Unitarian Universalist theologian Tandeyka documented a number of these stories in her book, Learning to be White. In it, she catalogs how white children are often systematically instructed that there's something wrong with people who are not white. She offers case after case where, as children of 4 or 5, white kids are implicitly instructed that they had done something wrong by associating with playmates across racial boundaries. This leads to the breaking of empathy, the rupture of compassion, the shriveling of souls, the casting of one community as the other by another community. The shrinking of souls. Theologians in our tradition, like Tandeyka, argue that empathy and compassion are basic human emotions. We are each born with them. And to lessen them, to lessen yourself, well, in the words of Rogers and Hammerstein, you have got to be carefully taught. You have got to be carefully taught. It's not a coincidence that Elon Musk, the world's richest man and defender of, amongst other things, a German political party closely connected to neo-Nazis, has claimed that a fundamental weakness of our society is empathy. Nor is it a random chance that the vice president has misdescribed Catholic theology as teaching that compassion is supposed to be placed in a hierarchical order. You love your family, then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community. And then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then after that you can focus on and prioritize the rest of the world, he has claimed. I guess he's not read either the Hebrew Bible or the Christian New Testament. In those texts, the royal law found in the scripture is love your neighbor as yourself. That's how a letter to James in the Christian New Testament puts it. One of 9 mentions of the exact words, love your neighbor as yourself, found throughout those texts. So perhaps we should not be surprised that Pope Francis himself appeared to rebuke the vice president in a recent letter to the bishops of the United States by writing, Christian love is not a concentric expression of interests. Love is not a concentric expression of interests. It appears that we are facing the nationalization of the politics of cruelty. Such politics are connected to a conception of God who limits empathy and compassion to only part of the human community. Some years ago, Congressman Al Green named this link on the floor of the House. He was debating a bill that expanded federal civil rights laws to include protections against discrimination based on gender identity or sexual orientation. He was speaking after another congressperson had invoked God as a reason not to protect vulnerable members of our society. Green responded by saying, you used God to enslave my foreparents. You used God to segregate me in schools. You used God to put me on the back of the bus. The God who puts people on the back of the bus, the God of segregation, the God of discrimination against transgender people, the God who hates the entire LGBTQ community, the God of slavery, the God of the politics of cruelty, well, I would suggest that that is a God who should not be worshipped. Green counterposed this God with a God of the politics of compassion. God, he simply said, created every person in this room. So if you're saying something's wrong with some other person, are you saying that God made a mistake? And then he continued, this is not about God. It's about men who choose to discriminate against other people because they have the power to do so. Because they have the power to do so. This past week, the current president stood before both houses of Congress and made a very different speech than Lyndon Johnson did decades ago. He celebrated a vision of a nation ruled by the politics of cruelty. In a speech so infused with doublespeak that it would have made George Orwell blush, he declaimed, our country will be woke no more. He bragged about the reinstitution of hiring practices that favor white men. He gloated over the elimination of critical race theories from our public schools, domains where such theories have not been taught, and implicitly advocated for the teaching of lies to children. He boasted about pushing policies based around the bizarre belief that there are only 2 genders. It's a belief repudiated by the rich diversity of human cultures, ways of being, and even biology itself. Almost 2% of people are born intersex, that is, born with having either chromosomal or physical variations that do not fit neatly into the categories of male and female. He praised himself for exacerbating the existential climate crisis. He placed targets on his political enemies. But mostly, he declared that he wanted the country to move from a war on poverty to a war on the poor. the war on the poor. Now, one vision of the federal government is that it can be used to redistribute wealth from the richest of us to the rest of us so that everyone might have something of the good things in life. The war on the poor. Another vision of the federal government is that its primary purpose is to maintain the police, the courts, and the army and do little else for the rest of us. When governments are cut back to these functions, then their primary directive is not to eliminate poverty. They are dedicated to ensuring that they are not dedicated to ensuring that everyone reaches their full human potential. They are instead directed to ensure that the property of the wealthy remains the property of the wealthy. They are devoted to the war on the poor by ensuring that the lowest wages possible get paid, that low-quality housing is permitted, and that food security and clean air and clean water are not guaranteed. In his declaration of the war on the poor, the president spewed nonsense about Social Security, the war on the poor. He also announced his aspirations for tax cuts. Social Security, of course, has been one of the most effective poverty prevention programs in the country. Without it, millions of older people will not be able to make ends meet. They will not be able to pay for food or shelter. They'll not be able to enjoy the good things in life as they live out their years. The president and his acolytes have let us know that they have Social Security in their sights. They've made the ridiculous claim that millions of people over the age of 120 continue to fraudulently receive benefits. They've suggested that such fraud and waste is costing taxpayers billions of dollars. Meanwhile, Elon Musk has declared that the nation's retirement program is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time. It most definitely is not. It is money that currently working people use to support those who have already made significant contributions to society. It has worked effectively for decades, and it could easily be extended by lifting the income cap of Social Security taxes and more heavily taxing the rich. Taxing the rich, the war on the poor. Tax cuts are to be a major weapon in the war on the poor. The president has declared his intention to cut taxes primarily for the wealthy by $4.5 trillion. The House has recognized that this will require $880 billion in cuts to Medicaid. How many of the 72 million people who currently use it will lose access to their health care because of such cuts? Without health care, how many people will die early or struggle with insurmountable medical debts? And for what? So that men like the president and his leading Afrikaner ally can have more power and wealth? Shaking his cane at the president, Congressman Al Green was clear about the consequences of the proposed tax cuts and the announced war on the poor. He stood up and said, "There is no mandate to cut Medicaid." He was removed and Congress censored him. It did so after failing to censor the members of Congress who encouraged the January 6th insurrection or disrupted speeches by Presidents Biden and Obama. Friday, on Democracy Now!, Congressman Green explained his remark. The president, Green stated, does not have a mandate to gut or cut Social Security or Medicare. We live in a government that is right now of the plutocrats, by the plutocrats, for the plutocrats. They have doctors. We have to stand for people who are not as fortunate as others. I have good health care. I want my constituents to have the same health care I have. I'm going to protect what they have. I'm going to protect what they have. It is a statement rooted in the politics of compassion. And that is what a good deal of what we need right now, clear articulations of the politics of compassion. In the face of tax cuts for the rich, we might call for taxing the rich more. The economist Thomas Piketty and others have thoroughly documented that the more heavily the wealthiest are taxed, the more the rest of the people in a country have more of the good things of life. Do you want better health care for you and your loved ones? Tax the rich. Resources to address the housing crisis? Tax the rich. More food security for those that struggle? Tax the rich. Quality education for people who lack it? Tax the rich. Now, you might not agree with this vision, and you might not approve of Green's recent actions, but we are in a time where we are facing the nationalization of the politics of cruelty, and so we need to name a strong politics of compassion. If taxing the rich is not what undergirds your vision of such a politics, I encourage you to consider what might. How else might we as a society collectively achieve a world where we are each invited to realize our full potential and no one struggles for a want of housing, food, or health care? I do not have to pretend to have all of the answers, but I do deeply believe in my heart that it is possible to live in a country that is more thoroughly guided by compassion and empathy. So, tax the rich, or please offer another suggestion of how to get there. Such solutions will likely be based on what I've called in the past the resurrection of the living, to waking up to the world as it is, not going to sleep as the current president suggests we should. Such a vision is inspired by a line in the Gnostic Christian text, the Treatise on the Resurrection. There we find this answer to the query, what is the resurrection? It is the truth standing firm. It is the revelation of what is and the transformation of things and a transition into freshness. The revelation of what is, a transformation into freshness. The resurrection of the living is that teaching, that wisdom found in so many of the world's traditions that tells us that the purpose of our lives is to open up to the glory, the beauty, and the wonder around us. It is to become aware of the suffering of others and to recognize that we are called collectively to do something about that suffering, just as Reverend King spoke of so beautifully in the prayer that Scott read of his. Now, I know that things can feel difficult right now. It can seem like that there is little we can do when the president is using the national pulpit to declare a war on the poor. If you feel that way, I encourage you to recall words from Dorothy Day found in our hymnal. People say, "What good is our small effort?" They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. So I invite you to cast pebbles with me. We do not know where the ripples might land. In the face of the war on the poor, in the opposition to the politics of cruelty, we can, together, take time to claim a space, this pulpit, our fellowship hall, get time together to articulate the politics of compassion and the religious vision that underlies them. A light shines for the upright in the darkness when they are generous, compassionate, and beneficent, again, advises the psalmist. We can act. You can join me in our Justice Coordinating Council on Monday, March 17th, to travel to Austin and tell our legislature that we want a society governed by the politics of compassion, not the politics of cruelty. You can be part of the March for Future Generations taking place today here and tomorrow here in Houston. Who knows what ripples such pebbles will cast? But mostly you can seek to live your life as part of a community guided by compassion and empathy. Love is the spirit of our congregation, we say. Living together, taking care of each other, encouraging each other to do what we can and should form the basis of a politics of compassion, however we ultimately might imagine it. Love is the spirit of our congregation. That it might be so, I invite you to say, Amen.
I invite you to once again take a look in your order of service, and you'll find a sheet at the bottom of it. It's our closing hymn words. We shall be known by the company we keep. Please rise in body or in spirit and join your voices in song with the choir.
Please join me in reading the words to extinguish the chalice found in the order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
It is time now, time that we thrive. Let us leave this place rededicating ourselves to the belief that society should empower each and every one of us to reach our full human potential. Go in peace, go in love. May our lives be a blessing. Amen.
Thank you for joining us. We want to know who you are and would love to connect with you. Please fill out the link to the online attendance form, and if you are on YouTube, click like and subscribe. If you're interested in joining our congregation, email us at membership@firstuuhouston.org. Thanks so much.